energy fills the room. So your work environment is filled with conflict. Your board meetings are filled with conflict, anxiety, and all sorts of things. Could we do it differently? My very first value proposition is that it's possible to create from a perspective and a place of being. Some people call it an abundance mindset. I prefer to think about it as the idea that simply the fact that I exist in a space is a value contributor itself. Let me practicalize it. I'll make an example that's simple. I used to have to prepare for meetings, executive level meetings. And I had an MBA. I knew a lot about how the world functions. And yet before every single board meeting or executive meeting, I would be stressing for days trying to collect and amass as much information as possible because I needed to prepare. I wanted to make sure that any challenge that is going to be thrown at me, I have a solution for. I've thought about it already. Performance culture. So then I would get into these spaces with really amazing people, but my focus would simply be, Namhla, you must solve all the problems all the time and perform at the top of your game all the time. And then I discovered it was possible that by simply being in the room, the combination of the wealth of experience and knowledge that I had amassed in that space was sufficient and enough to be a combination of that which would be a solution in the space. So that my leadership right now is simply about the fact that I am value myself. And because I am value myself, I create value. So sometimes what that looks like is that I can be in meetings where there are complex, difficult problems that are being solved. And I don't feel the pressure to speak because my job is to be listening to what's emerging out of the room, combining my intellectual capability and everything I know about research and about the statistics and the problem we're facing, but also listening to my spirit and my intuition and having a sense of what the flow of the room is, and simply sit silently and say, well, right now, my value contribution is simply to be silent and to figure out how to bring everybody to a consensus. Sometimes my value contribution is to nudge the person next to me, whom I know is brilliant but shy, and convince them to speak. But sometimes my value contribution in a room is to say, listen, I've been thinking about this and this is the solution. And at that point, I have no difficulty in voicing my voice because I know the place I am creating from brings life into a room. Now you are listening to me and you are thinking, ish, I've been in her shoes and right now I'm a performer. And the value proposition I'm making to you is that it's possible that you might get to a place where you have to reflect on your own leadership style, to think about, is it possible to bring my full self into a room, presence, so that it is the fullness of who I am that is brought to bear in every single situation that I face in my organization, in my company, in my society. In that space, that's where you create life. But also I want to talk to you because I know you are a leader of leaders. You are a leader of performers yourself. That as you do this amazing thing of recognizing talent in your organization, now you're going to be remembering Namhla's story and you are going to be thinking, I want to validate the fact that this young lady performs well, she's brilliant. But I also want to encourage her to be her full self in this environment. And what does that mean when she brings her full self into the environment? I'm concerned about who she is holistically. What are her interests holistically? And how do I make sure that all of that comes into the room? One of the wonderful things, and this is the second point I'm making, I'm going to make 3 points and I'm done. One of the wonderful things I then learned is that I don't actually have to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. Because being a leader in my world means I'm simply the center that maintains the stability and creates the environment through which solutions can come. Myself, I don't have to be a solutions bringer all the time because I recognize that around me there is brilliance, and my job is to figure out how do I ensure that that brilliance is brought to the fore. In the world of the fourth industrial revolution, with as much uncertainty, chaos, and complication or complexity that we face today, there is not going to be a greater capability of a leader and a greater skill than simply the ability to be the center of gravity, the stability in an environment, the idea that says I'm holding the space for leadership so that you can be and do what you need to do. In a world of complexity, where we are facing tough challenges, we're not always going to be the ones that are bringing the solutions, but we must figure out how do we lead in such a way that the solutions themselves can come. And a lot of that involves co-creation, the idea of consensus building, the idea that I am not forwarding myself as the celebrity CEO, but rather I am holding the floor so that people don't feel like they're slipping and falling through the cracks, but rather creating an environment that actually holds them to the point of their own brilliance. Holding the center of gravity. Yes? And that's the task that we have today in the context of the kinds of challenges we're facing. The last thing I'll say is this, is that whether I'm talking about you personally as I'm talking about myself, or whether I am talking about the challenges that we must solve in the world, one of the things we must realize is that we're not going to lead people who don't care about their nations. If you talk to 20-something-year-olds right now, who are saying it's not enough that you think I'm performing, I need to feel fulfilled. At 20, they're talking about I need to make an impact. And so as you're running your company, your organization, you are going to have a value proposition in there that's beyond profit, because you need to link what you are doing to the nation-building imperative. Now, I care about the nation-building imperative because I've been an activist most of my life, and I try and navigate the space between policy making and real changes in people's lives so we can address poverty, unemployment, inequality. And I have seen an amazing thing in South Africa right now where companies in the auto industry, in the energy industry, are not just simply saying, we want to produce the best possible car. They're also saying, we're going to try and figure out how to solve the unemployment problem in the country. We were talking just now with Maria about some of the things he's doing in his company, which has to do with a value proposition that has a social mandate. Because it's not only a great thing that looks good in your marketing campaign to have a social mandate, it's also something that creates value for the people inside who are going to have to say, yes, I do this thing, I'm an accountant in this team, but I know that what we are contributing to in the bigger scheme of things is a vision of a new nation. A vision of a new nation. Is it possible? Now, I know this is a global audience, but I'm now going to zoom into South Africa. In a country where we have an unemployment rate of close to 50%, and closer to 65% for those who are under the age of 35. In a country where in the last 2 years we've seen an increase in poverty levels than we've ever seen at any time. We sit and we're trying to decide as policymakers, how do you balance the complexity between limited resources and deciding whether you use them to create new jobs or to pay grants. And I've sat in conversations where myself, as knowledgeable about these issues as I am, because I'm trained in them, I sat there and I'm like, I don't know. Because it's so complex and so complicated that I could take myself out of the conversation, go and consult with business people, go and consult with citizens and civil society and figure out what is it that we need to do. And I came to one conclusion, that what we're trying to do, what we're trying to build, what we must build, is not a particular context or a particular environment, but what we must build are what I call ninjas. Individuals that have the capacity to hold the center for themselves so that they can see their way and muddle through challenges and complexity. Because I would be lying to you as Namhla if I said the world we face in the future is not going to be problematic. So I'm not trying to create the stability and the insurance of saying the problematic things are not going to be there. I just simply want the kinds of individuals who can hold steady as they are seeing themselves through the challenges. To say, you know what, I didn't envision that I was going to do this with my life as an accountant, as an engineer, but I can see the nation is burning. And I have the capacity, because I've developed that inside myself, I have the capacity to walk into the spaces where I know it's going to be difficult, because I am starting to walk to a journey towards nation building. Ninjas, what does that look like? What that looks like is that we need people in South Africa who are willing to walk through the fire and say, I will make the difficult decisions. And Namhla, who's worked in the global policy space, I've worked in the global policy space for almost 20 years. When I got the call to come into the office of the president 2 years ago, I was like, there is no way I would work for government. It's bad for my image. Corruption. These are people I've been fighting with for almost 20 years. The God inside me said, if you won't build, who will? So now, we're not thinking about politicians to lead us. We're thinking about you. CEOs who have built engineering companies, who know how to get stuff done. And we're saying we need to remove the idea that we must get career politicians leading nations, to get to a point where people who know how to do stuff can come in and rebuild this nation. I believe in this nation. I believe in this continent. I believe in our collective capacity to turn everything into good. But I know that we cannot do it until the resolution comes inside that says, I know how to hold myself steady through difficult situations. And because I know how to hold myself steady, I've done the internal work as a leader, I can now expose myself in a situation where I must hold others steady, including solutions, so that I can be the value that I'm needing to be in the environment that's needed. If South Africans themselves don't rise and make the decision that I'm ready to be Nehemiah and I'm going to go and rebuild, wherever I rebuild, we are not going to get to see the nation that we could be. So you can be a fantastic leader in your tiny little corner, but the story that will be told is that we were meeting in a wonderful meeting and the lights went off. The story that will be told is that we lived in a generation where there was almost 65% unemployment for young people in this country. The story collectively that will be told is a story that does not reflect the true value and brilliance that we have. And so, my only encouragement, and the only thing I can say from my experience, is that the sooner you be the light that you must be, and hold steady through the muddling of the fire, the sooner we get the Savior in you for our nation to rebuild.
Wow. Wow. A round of applause one more time. Wow. I am so speechless. And more than anything, the more you spoke, the more my heart said we're in safe hands as a young woman. So yeah, I'm very emotional. That was really powerful. So thank you for that. I think a lot of women in this room and gentlemen as well can agree that it was for them, but it was also for me, personally. That was for me. That is so powerful. You know, one of the biggest takeaways I took from what you said is creating from a place of abundance, but internal abundance. And just being so confident to ensure that in whatever room you are in, just allow your light to shine. And I appreciate that so much. Thank you. I'm very emotional. Thank you very much. That was so powerful. So moving on with our program, I'd like to welcome to the stage for another powerful keynote address, the governor of eSwatini Central Bank, Mr. David Phil Mnisi. Please do give him a round of applause. Excellency. Yes, sir. His Excellency, Dr. Phil Mnisi. Thank you, sir.
You know, after you just begin to wonder, where is this on? Is it on? Okay. Can we give her again a big hand of applause? I think Dr. Molapo, it shows that we are grown up and the next leadership must take over. But we have a role to play. Brothers and sisters, we are gathered on this great occasion, and I thank most profoundly the organizer, my mentor, friend, brother. We have known each other for a long time, if I'm not mistaken, almost 23 years. It's been a great journey. We've interfaced, interacted at various levels, contributing, influencing leaders, and he has made an amazing contribution to the leadership of eSwatini, played a role even in crafting the national strategy of the country, and let's give him a big hand of applause. Well, I was invited to come and speak. Now, in reflection, I didn't get the memo right because we discussed it at length. He was in Swaziland. It says, Phil, just come and talk about who you are and, you know, and let's learn from you the various hats that you wear. But then he made a mistake, and then he says, you will speak as a governor. Now, as a governor, you need to be careful because you speak policy. On the 23rd, I've already lined it up. I have got a monetary policy committee. We will be announcing movements in interest rates and giving a perspective on the outlook. So you need. And just prior to my appointment to the central bank, I was the CEO of eSwatini Sugar Association, the sugar industry, which is the largest corporate in the country. In total, comes just behind government in terms of employment. It contributes about 15% of the GDP of the country. And when I took over in 2016, we had just made 4.2 billion. And by God's grace, by the time I left to join the central bank 3 months ago, we had made 6.1 billion. And so I was interviewed. Prior to that, by the way, I was the CEO of Standard Bank, and prior to that, I was the assistant governor at the central bank. So maybe a little bit more, 33 years to your years, Mniki. But I was interviewed by they said these words. I'm not sure if you can put them up. I just want to reflect on them. Then I will move on to a changed subject that I want to talk about, authentic leadership. I'll talk about authentic leadership. But when they interviewed me, oh, by the way, that's our city. That's Bungane, where I come from. That tallest building is the central bank, the one on the far left, if you see there. So if you thought eSwatini was a village, you were wrong. We also have electricity. We don't have load shedding. Just mentioning it, just rubbing it in. And by the way, for my sins, I'm also the chairman of eSwatini Electricity Company, so your ESCOM here. So the head of state appointed me about 1.5 years ago, and I was given a mandate to get the energy right. So it's a very big mandate that I've been handling, and I currently hold the two responsibilities of being a governor and the chairman of the national utility. Can you put that slide? I think maybe this will be the only slide that I will show. Then I want to talk about authentically. When they interviewed me, and I said the COVID-19 era calls on us as central banks and financial institutions in general to be at the forefront of advancements in technology, innovation, and automation. I reflected hard on this because central banks are generally conservative. We ensure financial stability, monetary policy, and the Minister of Finance is responsible for the fiscal policy. And there tends to be lack of openness to new information. And I was, and I am, very truly geared to see how we transform regulators to respond to the challenges that we face today. And when I said this, I was very pleased when I joined the central bank, and that's what the whole presentation was going to be all about. We have introduced various initiatives that are talking to technology and being in the forefront. And one of them is, which I have already started and I've just signed a very big deal to introduce what we call a national payment switch. Now, those of you that have got a banking background, you'll understand that when you have a national switch, it brings lots of opportunities. First of all, it levels the playing field for all players, not only for commercial banks, but all financial institutions for payments and settlements. So it levels the playing ground. It also makes banking and financial transaction much cheaper or affordable, so that we can especially reach the unbanked, which we call financial inclusion. And the other very, very important mandate of having a national switch is its ability to create a springboard for foreign direct investment, which means you can now come into a country instead of linking, which is currently happening right now via South Africa or even the US, MasterCard, Visa, you can switch and directly have your correspondent bank. So it's a very strategic initiative technologically that we are driving. And it is in the national strategy of the country. The second one, which banks all over, I've just come back from Mauritius where we had a bankers meeting there, 24 governors and another 53 governors we met in Gambia 2 weeks ago. We are grappling with the issue of crypto assets, cryptocurrency, and banks are now engaging on what we call central bank digital currencies. And I'm already driving that agenda because I believe it is going to respond to the needs of our time. And we need to find a way as central bank of how do we create the environment, the enabling environment to create value for our people. And the last one that we are grappling with at the central bank in terms of technology is being a fintech, creating a hub where there's good think tank, thinking ahead, looking at scenarios, projections, simulations, combinations, permutations, so that as an institution we are not behind. I'm taking my team all over the world to make sure that we are at the forefront. So ladies and gentlemen, so you are talking to a governor who is, I wouldn't say I'm very tech savvy like most people, but I was so equally pleased at my exco on Tuesday when I arrived on Monday evening. I was teaching them how to navigate both Bookit or Govender. And I was so pleased because I think I'm the eldest in my team, but I was telling them how to navigate it. Give me a big hand of applause. I want to take off from a very excellent presentation, the value proposition and what you bring. And I just want to reflect with you, and maybe before I do so, let me just give you a perspective of the roles that I play. And I have just given you just being a chair and a governor. The other one that you must know is that I am a married man, so I've been taken already. I know the ladies that were looking. I've been taken 29 years ago, so I'm a husband. I have a daughter who is married. She's 28, and she's married to a Musutu from Lesotho. They live in Cape Town, but God has blessed them. They are quite, they've gone through school quite high, so I won't mention. And they also have some international jobs. Is everything okay? All right. So let's not worry. Somebody needs some attention. And so in the family, we are blessed. We are blessed to have two family members already earning salary, one in dollars and another one in euros. And we are so grateful with these jobs that they have, and they can work anywhere in the world. My son is 20. He's just finishing IB2, which is second level of matric, after matric, 2 years. And he will be proceeding to university in the UK next year. He wants to study industrial design. It is very particular. He wants to go to where Steve Jobs went. So he's so much into technology, and he's the one tech savvy in the family. So that's one job that I do, is to be a father, a husband. The other job that I do is to be a pastor. I'm a fully ordained pastor. I gave my life to Jesus in 1983. Wow. So for the last 39 years, I've been walking the journey as a child of God. And the Lord has really challenged us over the years, balancing the corporate life and the spiritual life. And about 3 years ago, we planted a church. In our church, we have got about 9 or 10 nationalities. It's cross-cultural. And we built a church within 5 months. We started on the 23rd of August during COVID, which is my wife's birthday. By the end of December, we had completed the church structure. And on the 1st of January, we're in our church, and it's growing by God's grace. Very influential. In fact, I just took a call from one of the top lawyers in the country who goes to our church, and we are blessed. And that role, I do it with great passion, and I believe it's a calling. The other job that I do is, as I've said, a corporate person, a governor, and of course, I also chair the Royal Commission, which advises His Majesty on economic issues of the country, and we also guide on remuneration of politicians, which includes Cabinet, Houses of Parliament. I've been chairing this since 2018, and by God's grace, I continue to do that job. So I've played a crucial role in the quasi-institutions and also in the political arena whilst remaining pure corporate. But there is one passion that I want to end with, then I'll come to authentic leadership and share some few reflection points with you, then sit down. There's one that I have, and which I'm excited to be here, is when I met my friend Billy, who is a cattle farmer. I'm also a farmer, so I do cattle breeding, and that I enjoy the most. I can tell you now, on Saturday when I finish golf, I'll shoot down to the farm to look at the cattle, even just spending an hour looking at them. It just refreshes me a lot. And then lastly, I'm an avid golfer. I play off an handicap. I've played down to handicap 5, but now, not getting too much time, I play off a 9. I do creep into a 10, but I can hold my game, so take a chance. The Bible says in Psalm 78, verse 72, David, not this David, maybe also this David, shepherded them with integrity of heart. With skillful hands, he led them. Skillful hands. The NLT version says, he cared for them with a true heart and led them with skillful hands. Brothers and sisters, we are facing a time as leaders, and I'm talking as a leader, and that's why I wanted to give you the context of who I am, so that you can see the relevance. We are facing a time where there is leadership deficit. There is leadership imbalance. We are facing corruption. My sister, when joining the civil service, one of the most concerning is working in a leadership tainted or colored with corruption. We are faced with leadership calamity, facing self-serving leaders, conflicts, and leaders that are focusing and tussling for power and share of voice. I want to submit 4 principles that I have observed over time. So when you see some of the hair gone and a little bit tinted, I quickly cut my hair so that the gray does not show that much. Otherwise, people will call you dead wherever you are. I want to share with you some practical things that I have observed, and I believe they hold true for leaders. And they balance what my sister shared on, and I think to a great extent what was reflected on yesterday, and we shall continue to reflect on. Number 1, I believe that for us to address the leadership crisis we face today, we need leaders that will lead with integrity. One character we draw from the Bible is Daniel, who was selected amongst leaders in a foreign land. And one attribute that distinguished him was integrity. A fault was sought in his life, and it couldn't be found. And he had some amazing attribute that reflected integrity. And one of them was consistency. Leaders that lead with integrity are consistent. I talked about David. You know, I have known him over the years, and some of you have interacted with him in the past few years. But let me tell you, I have observed him over the years, consistent in how he leads, how he empowers, and how he nourishes upcoming leaders. Leaders of integrity are committed. They are committed. And if I can tell you that I was in Mauritius attending a very big meetings for a week, but because my word is my word and my bond, I made a commitment to him. I wanted to change. Actually, I've got meetings lined up tomorrow with 2 ministers. But because I believe I must be a man of integrity and be integrous, my commitment must stand. I made all possible to get in here. Leaders of integrity are leaders who are of character. Now, charisma will take you to the podium. Character will take you to eternity. So, brothers and sisters, I challenge, as I challenge myself, in our contemporary world, that we need leaders that are authentic, and they have to highlight this mark of integrity. Daniel did it, prayed 3 times a day, could not be persuaded, and he was prepared even to suffer for it. In fact, one of the very outstanding lines of scripture that draws my attention is the wife of Job, who said to his husband, to her husband, "Far be it from me that I should say," that's Job speaking, "far be it from me that I should say you are right. Till I die, I will not put away my integrity from me." And the wife giving a testimony 2:9, Job says, then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast on your integrity? Curse God and die." Wow, let me tell you, brothers and sisters, I've been married for 29 years. If my wife can give a testimony that I'm a man of integrity, I will not wash my hands for a long time. Because that is a quality of authentic leadership. Authentic leadership can be trusted and entrusted because of integrity. Number 2, leaders that are authentic in our contemporary world, I believe, are leaders of impact. I listen to you, my sister. I can see that where you are making a difference. And that's what leaders should be all about. You know, you touched me, I almost dropped a tear, but I knew I was coming on stage. I pulled myself together. Especially when you said, "What shall be said about us?" There's an old song that says, "May those that come behind us find us faithful." I reflect today and I ask, what impact am I making to my family, to my community, to the society, to the nation, to the region, to the nations of the world? Authentic leaders lead with impact. They make a difference. They cause things to happen. They make a shift. And it could be a mind shift, concept shift, business shift, but shift something. And how do you shift things in life? I have seen 3 things that will help you to have impact. Number 1 is your level of exposure. You know, we can hold the same degree. By God's grace, I have studied But I have realized the major differentiator is how exposed you are. And I want to challenge leaders in our time and in our generation that let's expose ourselves. Number 2 is education. Education. Nelson Mandela says education transforms a man. A daughter of a peasant can become a doctor. A son of a mine worker can become a president of a nation. Education transforms. And then lastly is experience. You know, experience, it's something that you can't buy nor borrow. That's why they say what an old man sees seated, a young man does not see standing. That is the power of experience. You know, what an old man sees seated, a young man does not see standing. You know, some of us, you see us standing in front of you, you don't know the schools of knocks we have gone through. And by the way, what I have experienced, I know is deeply seated in me. And what matters most is how I use that experience for my own upliftment and uplifting others. So brothers and sisters, allow me to submit that authentic leadership is leadership of impact. Move something. Move from good to great, from great to superior. Martin Luther King Jr. said, if you cannot fly, run. If you cannot run, walk. If you cannot walk, crawl. But whatever you do, keep moving forward. Number 3, authentic leadership, I want to submit, are leaders that lead with intentionality. Intentionality. Now, this is very important. Leading with intentionality is when you have a vision. Vision provides direction. It gives focus, and it yields results. My leadership style, wherever I've been, by the way, the job I'm doing now is my 11th job. I worked here in South Africa for about 12 years. Went back to Swaziland, recalled to be the governor in a deputy governor in 2008. And I believe that wherever you are, you have to yield or give results, not excuses. Great leaders lead with intentionality. When you are intentional, you stay the course. It's not the powerful that win, but the persistent that overcome. Water flowing and hitting a rock eventually cracks it. How does it crack it? Not because it is strong, but because it is persistent. It is intentional. Let us intentionally be submissive as leaders, and let us intentionally lead from the front, from the middle, and from the back. By the way, let me share 2 philosophies of leading. It's called a pull leadership and a push leadership. When you lead with intentionality, there are times where you have to pull the team. In other words, you are at the front. You are facing the headwinds. And you say, come along, brothers. I'm showing the way. I'm walking the way. As John Maxwell says. But at some stage, you need to be at the back and be part of the team and say, we are together. Let's push. Let's get to the end of the journey. As I converge to conclusion, allow me to submit one key other principle of authentic leadership. And this I call leading with the kingdom of God in mind. Lead with kingdom principle in mind. I was talking to Dunstan earlier on. I like the way he put it. You know, in every area we do, brothers and sisters, I want to submit. What holds the core is who you are hooked on. If you are a leader, leading at home, leading in a school, leading in a church, at work, wherever we are, let's lead with kingdom principle. I wish that after I have served, and I desire that everybody under my voice here, may this be true to you, may this be true to me. When all is said and done, may we all hear the great voice, the ultimate voice of the Savior saying, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter now in the joy of the Lord. That is an amazing style of authentic leadership when you lead with kingdom principles in mind. John Stans, the great singer, that reflects my age, he says, the battle is over. It is finished. The battle is over. It is finished. And I wish that all of us, wherever we lead, we may even use the words of the Apostle Paul, who says, I have run my race. I have kept my faith. And I've finished my course. And now await the award, the crown of glory. And not only for me, but even for others. It is finished. Jesus is Lord. May I conclude by saying, no one plans of being mediocre. No one plans that. You cannot plan to be mediocre. Mediocrity happens when you don't plan. So you can be an authentic leader. You just have to orchestrate a plan and pursue it with tenacity, with intentionality. If you want to succeed, learn the traits that will make you successful and plan on living them out every day. And there are 3 things I have observed that will make you an authentic leader and you will fight mediocrity. Number 1 is be humbled and you will be great. I have observed that humility is not meekness, is actually greatness. Number 2, be courageous. And number 3, be faithful and fearless. Boldness and courage. One once said, you will never discover the oceans unless we are prepared to leave the shores. So allow me, brothers and sisters, to submit that authentic leadership in our contemporary world calls for men and women that will move out of their comfort zone, launch themselves in the era of innovation, technology, and transformation. And let us not be fearful of what I call the unknown terrains. By the way, did you know that every path you see and you walk through, somebody was bold to walk first? Why don't you and I be those pioneers and walk first? Face the tussles, face the thorns, and create the path. And others, when they walk, they will enjoy the journey. They will not know that there was once somebody who was prepared to leave the shores to discover the oceans. By the way, in the oceans, there are sharks, heavy winds, storms, and risks. Let us be prepared leaders. As we talk transformation, innovation, technology, it is the time that we are living in. It requires leaders like you and I to be authentic and cause a change in our societies and in our families. God bless.
What a powerful room. Such a powerful room. Just a round of applause once again for His Excellency. So powerful. I just kept writing notes on notes and notes, and I hope, Dr. David, we can have these on YouTube or somewhere to just continuously watch, because they're so powerful. And when His Excellency was talking, I was reminded of a saying that says, a man who stands for nothing will fall for everything. And the things that you shared for us, for me, represented a pillar of what I should stand on. which is integrity, impact, intentionality, and kingdom principles. That was so powerful. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. So just before I call the good doctor onto the stage, we're going to have another powerful conversation. It's going to be such a loaded day. There's a video that the team is going to loop for us. Is it ready? Okay. Thank you very much. I like when it said that effective leaders have a strong vision. And as I was watching this, I was reminded of a scripture in the Word where Jesus says, for you will do greater works than these. And just hearing the speakers share their experiences, I'm so inspired to take that upon myself and say, we will do greater works than our leaders are already doing because of where we are coming from. So that's really powerful. So up next, I'd like to call upon Dr. David. We're going to have such a beautiful conversation with the panelists, just sharing more about how we can develop the next generation leaders. A round of applause, everybody, for the good doctor.
Now, this is not roundy, guys. Come on, don't embarrass me in front of my guests. That's a round of applause. Can we get the mics for the people? Did you learn something? I don't like the word enjoy, because remember, when you're in ICANN, I take notes. I learn from people. Never ever come to a point where you know everything. Please repeat after me, please. Exposure will expand my expectations. Always learn from people. If you know anything about me, I don't care if the people serving whatever, you learn from them. Because you never know, in each and every one of us, there is greatness, seeds of greatness. Never come to a point where you know everything. Sis Namhla, thank you so much. I've got 3 questions for you. And wait, today you hit the governor thing, so 3 in 1 aqua fresh. Proud of you, my brother. Yang shanga pagachi jengelaki study there. Yeah. Sis Namhla, thank you so very much. 3 questions. And remember, we talk about authenticity. Rainier, isn't that amazing? The word authenticity, Mari spoke about it, Quinton, and I never briefed them. It's amazing. Can you see the common theme? People want us to be real. Can we say real? Wonderful. 3 questions, and then we're going to ask the people to do that. All leaders have got pressure. We encounter them. I'm going to ask about how you handle these 3 pressures, and then we're going to ask the people to do that. Pressure number 1, what happens to you as a leader? You're in the presidency, you're a mom, but this thing of self-doubt or insecurity, how do you handle that?
Oh, wow, that's a big one. And I think that all of us, particularly if you became a leader at a young age, imposter syndrome is something that we experienced. And so the brilliance and the light in you is recognized, but you don't see it in yourself, and you are put in places where you have to show up, and you're like, are they gonna find out that I feel like a fraud? I don't feel like I deserve to be in here. And I think for me, the journey was, number one, it took time. One of the things that my father taught me was give yourself the grace of time to learn and to become. In other words, the idea that I can allow myself process, I can allow myself to build to the version of me I want to become. But the second thing is being quite intentional, and I think, Excellency, you mentioned this, quite intentional and reflective about my own process internally. And so I'm quite involved in my own growth process. And one of the things I had to learn was all the world needs from you right now is who you are today. That was one of the smartest and most releasing things I ever learned. It was simply, the Namhla of tomorrow is going to be required to show up tomorrow. The Namhla of 10 years from now is required in 10 years. The Namhla that's required by the world today is the Namhla you are today. And I think that allowed me to say, self-doubt, I can put you at abeyance because I know that I know now, and all I am required to present is what I know now. So I've advised 3 presidents in the world. One German president, Madame Salif when she was a Liberian president, and now our president. And those opportunities came in weird ways and when I was quite young. And I always felt like, why me? Why am I here? And the thing I needed to say to myself is, all I'm going to represent is my own experiences as a rural South African girl who knows what it takes to develop a nation, who knows what it takes to develop communities. And so putting that forward in terms of what it is I know and being enough in myself and knowing that that's all I'm required to do, I think that is the thing over and over again that helps me to deal with self-doubt. By the way, every version of the next level you get to, you are always gonna have that moment of self-doubt. And so every single time I have to do this, every single time I have to recollect myself and say, remember who you are, remember what you know, remember what you represent. And all you are needed to do, including in this room, all I'm required to be is simply who I am.
Thank you. Very similar to my sister here. I lead with or take challenges at 3 levels. Number one, I believe when confronted with any situation, you better resolve it or handle it when you are calm. I intentionally calm myself down. And ironically, also that's what my father taught me, that whenever you are feeling unease or even angry, try to minimize, energy at that point in time. Rather build yourself up through calmness. The second one is acceptance. I accept who I am. I am comfortable with my identity. I define myself. I don't want to be defined. So every situation, I'm comfortable under my skin of who I am. Most paramount, I'm God's creation. And every situation may judge me otherwise, but this factor does not change. So I accept who I am, accept my identity. The third one is what I call learning. As a leader, I've just taken over as a governor, and I told even my entire ExCo, 13 top leaders, that I have a 90-day principle. I allow myself to learn, because when you learn, you get informed, and when you are informed, you can perform. So I allow that process of learning, and learning is at 3 levels in itself. You learn by absorbing new information, you unlearn to get out certain things, and you relearn, which is continuous learning. So when there is where I feel I'm being put under, which I have been, by the way, in all these responsibilities over time. And in fact, she talks about advising heads of states. You must know that you are not advising at a point of advantage. They are in power. And you need to be very careful how you advise, lest you might be putted out. So you need to be very diplomatic, but remain authentic. And I believe that I accept the situation I'm in, calmness, who am I, and be prepared to learn. Because if I don't learn, I will always think I'm right. And I allow myself to be vulnerable in some instances to say, I don't know it all, and I'm prepared to learn.
The second one, Brother Phil, in my book, I write that failure is not the opposite of success, but failure is part of success. I repeat, failure is not the opposite of success, but truly failure is part of success. The pressure of failure, how do you handle that? And the same thing, or your same question.
You know, let's us be real here.
You taught us authentic leadership, Baba. Integrity, intentional. Yeah, we're hitting with your shangiswazlako.
You know, you fail your way to success, and you need to fail quickly so that you recover. Yeah. So for me,
I like, let me let you pause. Because that word quickly, even when people take pictures, can I quickly take a picture? You can't take a slow picture. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Can I quickly do that, you know? So explain that, because this word we are using it just nicely.
Casual,
quickly, yeah. I love you quickly, you know.
Yes,
you know.
You know, like an instant comment.
Yeah.
No, you know, if you look at all innovations and all changes that happen, they don't just happen over time. I mean, they don't just win at all times. People fail, and they take their failure and turn them to success. So with technology, with innovation now, I would suggest, and I submit, fail quickly. In other words, fail, see your mistake, and see how you recover as quickly as possible. Now, let me contrast it with Thomas Edison, who, by the way, struggled for a long period to discover the light bulb. He did thousands of experiments, and when asked, why don't you stop? Because you have clearly failed. And he said, let me do the next one. Who knows? It might be the one that leads me to success. And it was that last experiment that gave us the light bulb. We're using lentils, but look today, we have got industrialization, we can run factories because there is the light bulb, there is electricity. So failure can be protected then, but in the times that we now live in, given the information era we are in, I believe you can fail quickly. In other words, fail, pick yourself up. The greatest tragedy, Dr. Molapo, is to fail and lie down. It's like when you are walking, you can like wobble a little bit, but wobble and pick yourself up. The tragedy is when you wobble and you lie down. You never pick yourself up.
Your thoughts on that?
Let me answer that question by sharing a memory, an experience that I had. And I'm going to talk about two things. Number one, how to deal with the blanket of disappointment in the context of failure. And I think one of my first lessons is about ensuring that disappointment doesn't define me. Disappointment, I've learned, is a spirit, and that you can wear it. And what it does is that once you've tried something you were really passionate about, and as you can learn and you can see I'm a very passionate individual, and I'm convicted and convinced about things I do. And I think once you fail in something that you're trying to do, the disappointment of the thing can make you withdraw from that vision and that hope. And so to speak intelligently to that spirit and not allow it to become you is an incredibly important spiritual thing that you've got to learn to do. A few years ago, I was outside of the public sector. I was an activist in the global space, and we were trying to develop an anti-poverty strategy in South Africa. And I led civil society in this country. And we worked so hard that we got to the point where government was just about to adopt the anti-poverty strategy. Then someone showed up in the political space and disappeared. And they basically put a stop to it. And it was one of the most disappointing things in the sense that I always knew that one of my roles in this country is to address poverty. And we thought that we had the solutions. And so even though that moment was disappointing, and I was quite open with myself to say, I am disappointed that we're not able to make a success of this right now. then this is the second lesson. I continue to hold the intention in my heart, the vision in my heart. Fast forward 9 years later, and I get invited to advise the private office on specific things. And one of the things I'm asked to do is to develop an anti-poverty strategy. And I believe that because we are God created, and once you partner with God, that which is a life that you hold inside yourself is always going to come to pass. But now as I engage in that work, I engage with it with the wisdom and the intelligence of knowing what it is that stopped us then, in terms of understanding the political animal that allows me now to meander the nuances of the space I'm operating in so that I can bring it to pass. So the failure itself, as you say, was not a failure, but I was quite naive and immature in my approach of what it is we were trying to do then. And I think that life had to wait for me to get to a point of maturity that allowed me to bring that which I had envisioned to life, and the opportunity presented itself. And I know it sounds like I'm talking about mythical, sort of like out of super spiritual things, but these are real things that as long as in your failure, the essence of that which you are trying to create remains in your heart, you are always going to have tomorrow to be able to implement that thing.
Can I just want to add, thank you very much. I think also at failure, just a thought comes to me. It's quickly surround yourself or find people that can lift you up.
Yes.
Because it's a traumatic period. You need maybe just a shoulder to cry on. Somebody who says, I hear you. It shall be well. So you need that company of friends that will still see the greatness in you and lift you up, especially in times of failure. Because the vision can be blurred, but somebody can say, Phil, you can still make it.
Wow. The last question, unfortunately, folks, because the governor still has to go back, but Excellency, Namhla is here with us for the full day. Last question. How do you use kingdom principles when sometimes you're feeling lonely? Adam had a cool time with God, no issues. Adam never wanted to go to heaven. Heaven came to visit Adam. The snake was there, chokos were there, no big deal. But the sister showed up. The challenges showed up. We are real here. And at one time, Adam says, Nalu we're together, we're sharp, but it is this woman that you gave me. The blame culture started and the things went on and on. Obviously, he didn't take responsibility. But I believe that time, loneliness started creeping in. And when you go through scriptures, through the leaders of scriptures, it doesn't matter how successful they were, but there was a time when there were public successes out there, but private failures. As a kingdom leader, how do you handle that loneliness? Start with you, Dr. Phil.
Thank you for starting with him.
I think this question should go to the audience. Well, there are moments of loneliness. You've probably given a context of a marriage situation. There are loneliness at work. When you feel as a leader, you know you are not being supported. You are pushing an agenda. Nobody seems to be hearing you. It could be at home, conflict within siblings, parents, and you feel lonely. So I think you can take it contextually in different settings, different environments, and you really feel that I'm really lonely here, and I need to come out of it. I need to survive this. I think for me, I would go back to what I said earlier. It defaults on understanding that I am human. I think sometimes we tend to be too strong for ourselves. And we believe that we can solve the problems of the world. I am listening a video which is talking about the father's heart. It talks about how we should every now and then be children and accept that we have a Father. And this Father cares for us. And this Father wishes us well. In fact, Jesus calls his disciples my children. And by the way, all of us here, we are adults. But when we become children, when we become Christians, we are called children. And he says it is people like this who will enter the kingdom of God. So, Dr. Molapo, I would say in times of loneliness, in times of where you feel that the world is falling apart, there is an anchor. And for me, it's knowing that I have a Father. And that Father who accepts me as I am, that Father wishes me well, and it might be dark. Weeping may last for a night, but joy comes in the morning. So the sun will rise again.
Your last thoughts?
I think the answer is totally covered well with that answer. But I think I should say, and I love the fact that you are asking this question, because I've always been puzzled by how we separate our lives, and we have this schizophrenia of I can be excellent in my space of leadership, but my personal life can be falling apart, and we never bring it together. And I completely believe in integration. And so the fact that I am a divorced mom, even though that's not my label, but that is something through which I have lived and thrived, as it were. And I think it's an integral part of who I am. And I think loneliness, number one, is I think what His Excellency has said, that you've got to be really quite aware and quite accepting of your own vulnerabilities and your weaknesses and understand them well. And so I've been quite frank about what my needs are personally and how I deal with those on a day-to-day basis. As an offside, ladies, the Bible does say that the man needs the marriage, but I'm sort of okay without it. Like that's what the Bible says. Is it says
Preach.
that you are the marriage needers. But I do think that you need us, and you know.
Hey,
Anyway,
go Russell, you are a marriage needer, my brother.
So just that vulnerability of being honest and facing your needs, and then working out what is necessary for you to be able to meet those needs. And so for me, what has been necessary is a solid group of people. I do not have a lot of people in my life in terms of like the intimacy, but I do have a group of solid sister network. I have a solid network of mentors. I have parents who are excellent at holding space for me when I'm unable to. And then I think, like His Excellency says, God as a father, as Abba, is a big part of who I am. And so one of the lowest moments of my life was in that moment where I realized I would have to get a divorce, which was about 6-7 years ago. That was at the height of my professional career, mind you, but somehow my personal life was falling apart. One of my responses was to be quite open about this in my workspace and say, I'm going to withdraw from certain things because I'm managing a difficult family situation. And I took time to care for myself. One of the very first acts that I did is that I flew to Thailand and I sat there for a week to try and figure out what to do. And in taking time away from my space, that allowed me to work through the next steps. And then after that, I took 3 months completely silent about what was going on because I needed to center myself. I needed to figure out, what am I going to do? How do I help my children through this? I went to counseling immediately, even before the divorce happened. And I took months before I told my parents, my best friends, and so on. That might not be the right response for you, but it was just a response for me that allowed me stability, that allowed me process and thinking space. At that point, at the point where I was ready to go public, I had a sense of direction. I had a sense of new vision about where my life was going. I had gone through the immediate shock of the trauma, and so I could hold space for my children. I could hold space for my family because I had gone through that process. So as I said before, I'm very intentional about what's going on like right now, and how do I deal with it, and holding my space through even moments where I'm like, I'm not going to work because I am just devastated right now. And I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with throwing support where I need support. I don't want to sound like I'm glamorizing it, because those moments of deep, deep trauma are deep trauma. They're not fancy. They're like proper devastation. But the idea that you can be held true by a God who loves you, who is a father, is the thing that allows you to get to the next version of who you are.
Well, you heard it from Excellency, DDG in the President's Office, Namhla, Mniki, and His Excellency Governor, Mnisi. So I'm speaking to some of you today. For me, I had to get 3 people, a coach, a mentor, and a therapist. Because remember that failure is not final and failure is not fatal. Yes. You can start again. So I pray that during this whole workshop, there'll be a couple of people helping us. Loneliness, sadness, anxiety, depression, suicidal attempts, so that these things do not derail you from the leadership assignment that you have. Remember, I can, you can, together we can. Let's give them a wonderful round of applause. Thank you, Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Once again, such a powerful conversation. I would have loved to ask a question, Dr. Dave. Yes. And maybe hopefully we can bring a mic to His Excellency and my biggest question was, how do we differentiate or how do we separate between self-acceptance and complacency? Because there is a huge self-acceptance, norm that people say, well, this is just the way I am, and I lead like this, and I talk to people like this, and that's just within my character. And then there is the need to develop and become a better person and, do more. So how do we differentiate between the two?
Please repeat the question for His Excellency.
I got distracted.
No problem. My question was, how do we differentiate between self-acceptance and complacency? Yeah.
So for me, and I was actually thinking about this last night, because I think when you're a CEO of a large company and you hear someone saying lead from being, it sounds like you're saying you don't want performers, but you need to deliver, you need results. And so how do you strike that balance? And for me, I think it's maintaining a tension. The tension between I am fully accepting of myself as I am now, but I'm working towards a vision. And the vision, where you're going, the next thing, is what maintains that tension, because it allows you to see where you need to get to. And so the pull is always the light of that vision, so that you know that the Namhla I am now has made possible the life I have now and the impact I have now. But I'm trying to address poverty in South Africa, which means that there's a vision of Namhla that hasn't happened. And that vision constantly pulls me towards a Dr. Molapo, as someone who's more advanced than me, so that I'm constantly challenging myself to eventually be that thing that's gonna be able to create this life that I'm aiming towards. So it's that positive tension.
Thank you. I just can't add on that. Honestly, I call it a compelling vision. You need to have something that drives you. Whilst you accept where you are, but it's like your achievements. You don't rest on your laurels. You always aspire. And how do you become great? I talk about exposure. There are people that have gone before you. There are people that are great. I was talking to Dr. Molapo yesterday, we had a dinner. It's recognizing greatness in your presence and don't miss it. And don't be comfortable and say, I'm just okay. But there are people that are causing a shift, pushing frontiers, moving new terrains, and therefore you can have that compelling vision. And in fact, I talk of, I have a reflection of being land-locked mindset than land-linked mindset. So taking, for example, eSwatini, I was talking to somebody there, in fact I was addressing cabinet. I said we need to shift our mind. We are a landlocked country bordered by Mozambique, South Africa. We can easily confine ourselves small, 1.2 million people, and really think landlocked, but we can think land-linked, we are going to a different narrative. You can say now, how do I access Mozambique? How do I see South Africa as an opportunity? So you push the frontiers by a compelling vision and not just accepting who you are. Even in life in general, you know, you study to this level, you keep on studying. You become a better father. I want to be a better father. I want to be a better husband, a better golfer, a better farmer. Whilst I accept who I am, comfortable under my skin, because I have defined whom I am, I'm not being defined, but I push myself and create that positive adrenaline.
Thank you very much for that. And what I'm taking from that is it's basically the acceptance of the core and not the circumstances and the things around you, because you can always change that when you have a deep core. So thank you so much for that. That was a pressing question I had during the panel conversation. So moving on with the program, we're going to have another panel discussion that I am very excited about once again, and most importantly, very passionate about. So just to give you a little bit of a background, I think that will lean into this conversation, is that I've done a lot of mentorship programs within communities and spoken to a number of entrepreneurs. And they raise a couple of concerns about the things that kind of hinder them from having their businesses grow, just being the leaders that they need to be within the African, Pan-African space. And one of the biggest things that they've actually come up with is the red tapes that we face as entrepreneurs within different industries. And my panelists today are hopefully just going to open up this conversation with us and maybe lead us towards the right direction in talking about the economic transformation that we need in South Africa. And I think particularly in the different African countries that we have, also for the people watching online. So I'd like to welcome to the panel Mr. Landile Shembe, who's the CEO of Shembe Foundation. Please do give him a round of applause. Is he around? Is he here? He is here. Okay, so while we wait for him, I will also call up an international legal consultant, Mr. Reg Thomas. Please do give him a round of applause as he comes to the stage. Mr. Landile Shembe here. Please do give him a round of applause as he comes on. And we have Adri Lambert joining us online. Is he there? He's not here. Okay, so it's just going to be the two gentlemen and myself. Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. So, Mr. Reg Thomas, I think my first question to you is, what role do legal institutions and policymakers play in transforming the economy?
I think sound. Okay. I think it's important for, we've been talking about authenticity from yesterday and today. I think another word that we need to add to the mix is integrity. And I think it's important when leaders, and when I speak about leaders, I talk about leaders that lead institutions, have in their charters, have in their constitutions, integrity that plays a very important part. Because if you practice integrity, then you have the respect factor, not only for your employees, not only for the constituency that you represent, but you have a respect for people in general and the human capital. And when you have a respect for that, then you identify the challenges that people have. Because it's no longer about profits only, but it's about individuals, it's about humanity, it's what people bring to the institution. And happy human capital will generate far more profits than unhappy staff, employees, and so forth. So it's not only about the directors, it's not only about the leaders in that organization and what they strive for and what is their goals, but it's about the people that they lead. And in order for institutions to maximize the efforts of the people they lead, of the constituencies. They got to respect their backgrounds, their creed, their color, and where they come from. And that leads to a greater margin. And that will definitely impact insofar as the economy is concerned.
Absolutely, that's true, because I think similar to the conversation we were having yesterday about Thabo, is that when you are dealing with them based on where they are, it's easier to set policies that would be able to be helpful for where they are and who they are, versus giving them these red tapes where they won't be able to actually come across, which is interesting. And coming on to you, Landile, I just wanted to find out, so right now we've got the fourth industrial revolution, which I actually like to call the forced industrial revolution, because COVID has just forced us to now start, realizing that tech is the in thing. And I just wanted to find out from you, how does the fourth industrial revolution aid to business and entrepreneurs in terms of breaking down those walls and those red tapes that have maybe stopped them or limited them, rather into participating in growing the economy?
Thank you, and good day, everyone. This 4IR, it is a buzzword, because if you are still talking 4IR, then you are behind. Because we are now at 7IR, where robotics would possibly replace most of the work. And some of us are trying to claw back those unnecessary duties that robotics would then. You see, when you talk about machine learning, you are talking about a machine that can replace you and learns as it goes. So in order to impact, I'm now going to your question. Now, if you move from 7IR, and then you come back to where we are, the forced IR, the gap gives us an opportunity to start at a very level of, or a very basic level of unemployment, where you begin to then create industries where people connect without having to see each other, where you would have had a company do certain duties, as in maybe they are doing forward freighting or they are doing transportation. You create an Uber model, but that resides on the cloud. So let me give you a practical example and stop speaking big English. If a person is staying in the township and they have a car, another one has a bike, if you connect them onto a cloud where you create the biggest transportation network that has ever been seen in this country, you are beginning to now KYC these people and check if they are correct to be in a space to handle other people's goods. And then you then take those people and turn them into two things. One, an unsurpassed supply chain management network. The second one is you turn them into, what are they called, these cars that move money? What are they called? There's a term for it. Cash in transit. Where in the township economy, you have a tuck shop that has now run out of money because they dispensed it to buy supplies, cannot now supply change. If you have those people that are in the network and they are trustworthy and they've been checked, you are able to then supply money and keep it in the township. If you are staying in Soweto, money must not leave past Parakwanath. It must not, if you are in Tembisa, it must never go past that mall. So you are keeping money in the sense that whoever has money and sees it in the system, just like an Uber app, who's got 2,000 rands cash flow, you send it there, and you pick up here, and you send it here, and it works within the town economy where you then find who's doing veggies and they are bought here. So nothing comes from outside of the township. You then find the pieces of land where municipalities are happy to give to you, and then you find the people who are getting the 350 rand grant to work those lands. Because you are then instilling a new culture that says, yes, I'm making 350 rands. Yes, I'm also receiving 2 grants for my grandchildren. But suddenly I feel that I'm worthy because there's something I am doing. Now you've got your veggies here. You've got this network infrastructure that is unequaled, that can move money anywhere and everywhere, but it never leaves the borders of the township. Then you are beginning to say to that kid that is sitting at home, you were taught knitting, let's do it. And here's a space that has been created for so wake up and go and do something. And why are you doing it? Because in the network, there's someone who said, I would like someone who can do these 5 dresses for me because I've got an event. And when you connect people on whether they are in East London or they are in Cape Town, but because they are in this network, they are able to order within this network. Before you know it, 3 in 5 people would actually be working who were not working previously.
Yeah, thank you for that. So my biggest challenge, and it's something that I also mentioned yesterday, is that most of these ideas are really great, but how do we then take those into the communities? How do the leaders in this room begin to take those into the communities? Because currently, an average South African is using, or let's say an average African would be using a phone, they have data, and they're still going to ShopRite to pay for their DSTV. So I think that's why even when we say 4th Industrial Revolution, it's literally only within a small percentage of the country. So how do we then break those barriers into entering those communities and these leaders reaching those people and those entrepreneurs and other potential leaders in those spaces?
It's a very practical answer. You get free space in SAUBC. Right before generations, and on the 3 to 6 slots in Ukhozi FM, Umhlobo Wenene, where they are listening. And then you go into, as I said yesterday, you go into your TikToks. Okay, who does it? Let's start there. Leadership is necessary, ma'am. And I paused. Leadership is necessary in that it needs, you have YES, that has all that database. You have NYDA, it's got that database. You got the presidential one, that's got the database. You got the DTI one. Merge these. Then you have a singular database. Then you reach them by reinstilling. The reason Coca-Cola is the best-selling product in the world is because they advertise every day. The reason a clientele sells so much is because they are nonsensical on the TV. Hi, I'm Lillian Dube. Whether you like it or not, once a day you are going to see that Dube couple. Well, they are not mother and son, but that Dube family. So you go back and be a clientele, be a Coca-Cola, but do it from government. You own SAUBC. You have 18 radio stations and 12, or is it now what, 6, 8 TV stations. You have the airtime. Get ETV to come in. And then you are saying, youngsters, go to this portal, register. Have you found a job? And then you give examples of the people that are functioning within this system. And the design and the architecture in this room, there's enough brains for that. I always surround myself with smarter people. I come up with the ideas and I give them to smarter people than I. But this is my thinking of how.
Thank you very much for that. And I think I'll pose this question to Reg and also you. And that's that with the advent of decentralized economies, obviously seen through Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and other blockchain technologies, what response should African countries actually be giving?
I think it's important that the the countries are given the alternatives. As we've heard yesterday, us locally here in South Africa have challenges doing business with foreigners. Whether it's importing from China, whether it's importing from Europe or America. You have challenges because of the regulations that governs the Reserve Bank. And we had one of the governors, and we were chatting to him last night about free trade, and we're talking about how well Dubai is doing. It's because of the free trade and the ability to allow people to trade. The important thing is that you want to maintain control of the economy that's not growing, that's going nowhere. So the big question is, what are you controlling? You're controlling failure. You're not giving the people the opportunity to explore alternatives. And there are so many opportunities that are lost. I was involved in a property transaction that involved billions about 10 years ago that could have generated thousands of employment. They were looking at developing a boutique hotel and a village and so forth in KZN, where I come from. And unfortunately, because the investors could not bring in the funding into the country timeously, the local banks foreclosed on the property. Opportunity gone. Jobs lost. The economy suffers. And it's because of that mentality and the controls that we ourselves do an injustice, not to the outside, but to ourselves inside. And we want to talk about job opportunities and how do we create that. Government has not created that. Government will never create jobs. We've seen it in the past. So when politicians talk about we creating jobs and this, that, and the other, we all know that it's just shop talk and nothing beyond that. Private sector does more, and we know that for a fact. And so private sector uses their own ammunition, their own intellect, their own resources to generate income, to generate employment. Now, when private sector is exposed to alternatives, certainly they're going to exploit, because it's not happening within the confines of our own country. And so the other important factor is, when foreigners invest into the country, it's okay because our country is talking about foreign investment. So they're very happy to receive foreign investments. What happens when it comes into the country? You utilize it for development, whether it's industry or whether it's property, whatever it is. And so when those investors need to take their profits out, then it becomes a problem. So which intelligent investor wants to bring in funding into the country when you can't take it out after that? The same with us here locals. When we want to trade with the outside world, there's so much of red tape that it doesn't allow us to trade with the outside people. So we got to look at what we were talking yesterday with our good friend Dunstan. And you talk about crypto. So you don't need to be regulated insofar as the economy is concerned. You can trade with anybody on any part of this globe and you can be happy. And so the alternatives are there. And fortunately, the alternatives are there because it doesn't stop entrepreneurs, whether it's in the township, because crypto is non-discriminatory. So it doesn't allow for only corporates to trade in crypto. You can be Tabo and you can be trading in crypto. Because all you need is the app and a wallet. So I think we are moving into that space of economy that's going to allow the mindsets to shift, as well as for us to break out of this restriction that we've been finding ourselves in. And people are going to become successful. And people are going to become better entrepreneurs. And let's hope that that's going to increase the standard of living, whether it's in the townships or whether it's in the suburbs, and people will find their callings insofar as whatever they want to do.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Reg. That was profound. Let's turn South Africa into a giant factory where South Africans are trading amongst themselves. What am I talking about? I'm going to pose a question that I do not want. It's a rhetorical question. But I would like to be challenged. If anyone has an answer to the question I'm going to ask, please raise your hand. Who can remember a single paragraph in the National Development Plan? Any paragraph? and recite it to me. We have a National Development Plan that South Africans don't know. Neither can I, by the way. Because it's a document. Government departments will show you in every communication they make, they quote the NDP. Only they know it. You ask an ordinary South African, they can't quote a single, okay, forget the paragraph, it's a bit much. Give me one sentence that you've read in the NDP, that you recall. Okay, let's turn South Africa into a giant factory. Leave the paperwork. We are not looking at 2063. Let thinkers and intellectuals and scientists worry about 2063. Today, let's turn South Africa into a giant factory. We are a part of BRICS. BRICS has needs and products that they get from all over the world. Why is it that we do not have a national policy that says this is what South Africa produces and exports, except Ubuntu? Either than Ubuntu. What are we producing and giving to the world? Don't tell me minerals, because there's no beneficiation. Block the ports then if you must. Beneficiate by force. And then sell products that are, seeing as that is a zero-sum game, it's not going to happen anytime soon, then let's leave that. Let's look at things we can do. What is Russia lacking right now? Why are we not jumping into that opportunity? You hear people say, I'm looking for DTI funding and IDC funding. I want to sell these nuts. There's these nuts that everyone...
I'm sorry.
macadamias.
I'm sorry, can I interject? You asked
Yeah.
what is Russia lacking that we can supply? Democracy?
Okay. Reg, this is not a podium where you campaign for December 2024. So then the macadamias, you'll hear people saying, hey, do you have a plot of land that they in KZN? Yes, we are the third largest landowners as the Shembe family. So I do get real questions where, can you give me a small piece of land? I want to plant macadamias. Why isn't there a macadamia inside Sisitoko Titiza's office and a segment that deals with this new buzz of macadamias? Why are people going and trying it individually? Seeing as 5 out of 10 people are trying to plant these nuts, then there should be somewhere where they can go to and say which areas are available, funding for it, where is the market, the Dube Trade Port model. Dube Trade Port in KZN, I take out my hat to them. They say any farmer in KZN that can produce anything that is fresh and can be checked, we will buy. Can it not be a national program? They buy anything and everything that is produced in KZN. It goes to Dube Trade Port, it becomes their headache where they take it to the world. Let's turn South Africa into a giant factory amongst ourselves and amongst the BRICS countries as a start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a mouthful. Thank you. And Reg, coming to you, I mean, I've only been an entrepreneur for about 5 years, and I'm quite interested to know what are the other legal constraints that I think leaders in different industries need to be on the lookout for in terms of diversifying and growing their businesses?
I think there's so much of red tape, and if you listen to government talking all the time, you look at, there's so many restrictions. I mean, if you want to start a business, try registering with CIPC. They change their names so regularly, you kind of like lose track. You want to register your company. You then got to open a bank account. You then got to register yourself on the CSD, which is the Central Supply Database. You got to register yourself here, there, and everywhere, and the red tape just continues and continues and continues. SARS gets involved. You got to get a tax clearance certificate, and the compliance and the regulations just goes from one to the other. And it causes such a frustration amongst people to start a business, to trade, that people then start to trade on their own, which naturally affects the fiscus because there's no reporting. So your regulations, whilst it's supposed to regulate compliance, which is good, and it should be there, but it becomes so restrictive that people prefer to trade illegally. And so if you look at even the taxi industry, which is one of the largest industries in the country, yes, they're regulated, we know how powerful they are. Look at the fuel consumption. I mean, they've been talking about protesting because of the ups and downs and so forth. But look at how much of economy is lost or unaccounted for formally. And so when we talk about regulations and when we talk about how businesses can grow, government needs to revisit our people. Not everybody has access to laptops. Not everybody has access to government structures and to making sure that everything is okay. So we need to revisit our people and revisit the databases and revisit how we make trading possible, easier, even with banking. Like we know that banking has now come down to the people as opposed to previously where you had to go in, sit in front of a bank manager, tell your bank manager why you don't need the money so that he can give you the money. You got to produce a written business plan, do a formal presentation, ask him for an overdraft. Tell him that I don't need the money, but if you like it, you can give me the money. Now we have credit. And you want to start a business or you want to buy a truck to transport your goods from the farm to the city. And suddenly you get an SMS that say, your application has been declined. Straight out. Nobody has spoken to you. Nobody understands your vision for your business. Nobody understands the people that are working on the farm with you. Nothing. Nobody understands how you're going to grow your business. You just get a text that says, declined. What do we do? And that is something that government needs to address. And that is something that the politicians, the people that are involved, need to look at. How do we address basic things like this that can grow little businesses into big businesses that sustains our households, that sustains our community, like Landile is talking about. We're not interested in the government as a whole. We're talking about the little pockets that we find ourselves in. And when people can do that, then your little 350 rand that you're giving every month, you don't have to give because people no longer need it. Because they can sustain themselves. And so if you look at how much government, it costs government per month for this 350 rand, and the total amount that they spend per month, and if that amount could be used strategically to empower businesses and entrepreneurs, we would be far progressive than where we are, because as it stands, there is no cut-off date for the 350, and so that expectancy must continue.
Sure, that was powerful. Mam Namhla, that was for you.
That figure is 15 billion a month, by the way.
Just repeat that, Landile.
15 billion a month. That goes out from SASSA every month in perpetuity. That's just the one part, not the other one.
Thank you very much for that. And I think my last question before we take any questions on the ground would be, I mean, we're talking a lot about the things that needs to be done, like, you know, making South Africa a factory and having the government change these policies for us. But what can the CEOs in this room do tomorrow, today, after this conference, to begin to just make trade easier and to possibly maybe alleviate some of these constraints, or maybe help the other entrepreneurs that are upcoming?
I spoke yesterday and I said, let's think outside the box. You've got your yearly forecast. You see other companies as competition. But you need to begin to then say, what can, and I said, not CSI. I want to call it interbusiness or integration or between businesses. There was a symbiotic term that was spoken of some years ago, where businesses come together, where a business that is in supply chain, and one that is in agriculture, and one that is in manufacturing, they create a circle or three circles, and where those circles converge is where jobs will be created. It's a no-brainer. So the CEOs around the room, they need to go back and say, I have to work with this manufacturer whether I like it or not. I have to move my goods whether I like it or not. And I have to have storage whether I like it or not. And then if you merge those three circles, you'll find a convergence spot, which is where jobs will be created. That's the formula. There's no other one.
My take is different. I think, first and foremost, I am equally as passionate about our country as all of you are here in this room. And I think we are here because we're passionate about our country. We want to know how we can improve, how we can better our country. I think we've seen ourselves since democracy, and we all had this global view that our lives are going to be better. It's going to change. And the only thing that has changed is that we have the freedom to put a tick once every 4 or 5 years. Wealth has not transferred into our hands. It remains in the hands of those that always had it. And when you look at talking to the CEOs in this room, I think we're talking to the wrong people. Because these guys are maximizing their energy, their potential, to do the best that they can under difficult circumstances. Jagersfontein is in trouble, like we've seen over the weekend. Government has not shown up. The gift of the givers has a program and they are there. Any disaster, and I come from KZN, they are leading the disaster management program in KZN. So private sector and the CEOs and all corporates represented here are doing the best that they can without government. and something as natural as Fontaine that's happening at the moment. We need to talk about a plan. We need to have a meeting. We need to trouble our good sister here. They need to put a plan whilst people suffer. So these issues need to be addressed to government. And it's people like ourselves in this room needs their voices to be heard. It's the community leaders that needs their voices to be heard. And not just heard, but we've been talking about, the Bible says, be doers. Don't only hear the word, but be doers of the word. And I think when we can start to act, then this country will be a much better place than we all want it to be.
That's powerful. And before we get to you, one of the biggest things that I'm really getting from what you're saying is that there is something that is already being done. And I'd just like to pose this to the CEOs that are actually sitting in this room, because I do believe that there's so much power in exposure, which is the conversation that was happening. And I think it's so important that as CEOs of these companies, it's so important to also afford opportunity to the smaller businesses, because that's sometimes the only way I can break a barrier into applying for a bigger contract or whatever the case is. But if I'm already given other small opportunities that accumulate for me to eventually grow my business. So that becomes one of those things I just wanted to lay out there. But you can go ahead, Landile.
I'm in agreement with you. With Dr. Mulapo's permission, I will then say this. Thomas, stop campaigning.
Doesn't mean to say that because I'm a member of the ruling party that it's a freedom of association.
I know the nominations are open, but please. There was a coming together, this is 2019, a coming together of some unions in COSATU led by Nehau, and then SAFTU, unions led by NUMSA and VAVI, who were leading the collection of these unions. And then suddenly we had Santaco joining in. It started by Santaco KZN. Then it went on to NAFCOC showing an interest. And then we had a joining of ACHIP, which is the Hawkers Association. I'm answering the what do we do when we leave this room part. And an organization called South African Economic Fund was registered, SAIF. And at some stage, in their drunken state, they decided to make me CEO. I know they had drunk something. Because how do you make me CEO of an organization that has the power of 455 billion capitalization? An organization that represents over 20 million people, when I already represent 6.7 million Shembe churchgoers. They said that is because of that. But what is missing in that organization was always companies that are run by the CEOs in this room. So we then created a South African Economic Fund investment, which allows for companies that want to change this country to participate. So you already have these organizations that have a capitalization of 455 billion. Their interest is to gear it maybe to 4 trillion and get rid of the ESCOM debt and make ordinary households to pay 100 rands a month. They've got these formulas that they've come up with, and they want to delist Telkom. So that is their interest. Let the organizations carry on with their mandate. But in the investment space, you then have your companies, the associations you belong to, that can come in and say, here's a forum that you will own. I don't need to be a CEO of that one, please. I will deal with the politicians or the unionists on the other side. Where you then go and say, here's a forum that has the backup. When last did you see Vavi agree with COSATU on anything? It's a unique space. Take that opportunity and say, here's a forum, I want to register my company, and I'd like to register my association. We would like to change South Africa or add value, create jobs, and find this development we are talking about. So where do we go from here? That is an open invitation. Through Dr. Mulapo, he can facilitate, but it is available to create that companies forum. Then imagine the capitalization of just the companies that are in this room. I know there's an African bank CEO here somewhere. I saw him yesterday. Imagine the capitalization. Then you go back to an African bank and say, speak to your peers, let's gear this thing. You suddenly have 1 trillion. That you can then go back to what Reg is saying. You go back to these pockets and you start energizing these pockets that then create jobs. It's not that difficult. Yesterday I was saying, I'm proud to say I have contributed in creating 150,000. The word I didn't say yesterday is sustainable jobs. They are continuing to work. When there was COVID, now imagine all of us in a forum, what we could do. Thank you very much, and thank you, Talk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Landile Shembe. So we're going to open the floor for any questions, if anybody has any questions before we wrap up the panel. Does anybody have any questions? Going once? Once. Okay. Can we please have a mic over there? Oh, there's a I can hand you a mic. There we go. Yes.
Thank you very much to the panelists and to you, Michelle, and to the good doctor. My question is, how do we improve the linkages, like communication and other linkages between the public and private sector? Because it feels like we are pitting one, excuse me, we are pinning one against the other, whereas seeing Mniki today, it shows that we all want the same thing and we're all fighting towards the same goal. So how do we make sure that the linkages between the private and public sector are more aligned towards the same goals?
Mniki would like to answer that question.
Just to say something at the end.
Yes.
At the end of the questions.
At the end of the questions, okay. All right. Are you gentlemen going to answer the question? Would you like to answer the question? To ask. Okay, so let me just get the question answered and then we'll come to another. And then there's also another question right at the back. Awesome. All right, you can go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for the question. The short answer to that is there's NETLEC. However, in NETLEC is a policy environment. What you are asking is what can be done differently. And I don't I don't pose as though I have answers for everything. I always hear people saying, us as society must do better. I don't know who society is.
It's us. We are society.
Do you then find anyone waking up the next day and saying, I, as a member of society, am doing this? It never happens.
Yes.
So let's move away from these semantics and say the answer to your question is, in this room, the question was asked, in this room, let there be someone who then stands up and say, who is interested in starting this? Here's a pen and paper, please put down your name. Or can we contact you in this? So that you then begin to say, now to your answer. I know I always go to Cape Town, trying to reach Zimbabwe from Durban. But I eventually reached Harare, don't worry. Government, you see we have differing views with Reg. He says we are talking to the wrong people. I'm saying we are talking to the correct people. Which means the two coming together, not in these structures where policy is discussed. You need to have an approach that says, do not blame government. Government is doing its part, Reg. I am not proud of the pace at which. I am not necessarily proud of them not following their own statements saying we can do more. But they are doing their part. It's a starting point. Where businesses needs to be vocal is where they say beyond our profits, we want to have a country in order to operate in. Therefore, we force you onto a forum that will produce results. Then you invite the youngsters that have these bright ideas, a new cell phone, a new innovation, a new this, and you put them there and say, here they are. Universities have got them in droves. You take them and say, here they are. How do we facilitate these ones that are in front of us? Not the youth of the country. Who's the youth of the country? These ones that we have here. Can we facilitate these ones? Next month we have a new target. These ones. By the end of the year you would have done so for over 1,000. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. There was a gentleman over there who also had a question. Just to be time sensitive, I'd like to ask that we keep our questions very brief and the answers very brief as well. Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Doc, for the opportunity to be here and the panelists since yesterday. Just a quick question from a systems thinking perspective. When we look at the economic structure of the country, and it's an old problem, and of course it's a capitalistic systemic issue. But in South Africa, we face challenges of a special type. And even if a new industry were to come up today, you will have 3, 4, 5 major players. Historically, always 4, 5 major players. If you look at economic data, finance is the biggest industry and it's growing at least by 1 or 2% per quarter in terms of its contribution to GDP. So we are having this kind of a challenge, and it then has a net effect throughout the economy and how we will then create the jobs and develop the human capital that should follow the key economic drivers of the country. So I just want to ask this one question. I have many, but just one question. How do we then begin to think about how to break the oligopolies in these major industries so that it unlocks real value for jobs and sustainable jobs, which is the term that you are shying away from utilizing moving into the future? Thank you very much.
Again, you become, thank you. That was a very detailed question and background. It is true, the financial sector is the leading contributor. However, it is the first oligog that needs to be broken. Now, you are not going to get to the Banking Council and have this talk. They won't even offer you coffee. They'll call security. It is not going to happen. Sorry for taking time. But how do you then do it is you identify the ones, the people. Okay, I'll give you an example.